Welcome to the Trending XR podcast, where we discuss the latest in augmented reality, virtual reality, and AI with industry leaders who are shaping the future of how we will work, socialize, and go about our daily lives in the third dimension. In the not-so-distant future, we won't even be using phones. We'll be using these. I know, sounds crazy, but we have never been closer to this future concept becoming our current reality. I am so excited to share this new world with you. I hope to teach you, inspire you, and ignite your passion for extended reality. It's time to change dimensions. Are you coming? Welcome back to Trending XR podcast. Today's guest started his journey as a creative as a street artist, which led to him pioneering augmented reality solutions for global giants such as Disney, Nike, and Sony. He is also an ambassador for Meta and Snapchat. I'd like to welcome on DODDZ.
Hey mate, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for joining us. I'm pretty stoked to talk to you today.
No, I honestly I appreciate you reaching out. I know we've been meaning to connect for a long time, and this is a good excuse to do that.
Yeah. I've been following you on Instagram for a while. I got into AR probably 4 years ago. I was like strolling through the feed, and I think I stumbled across Don Allen's page, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with his work.
hmm
Um, and like through like following all these people, you started showing up, and I was like, oh man, he's making some really cool stuff. Which is I'm excited to show everybody about. So this is particularly cool having you on because you're my first guest that's specifically doing AR. So far, I've talked to people who are in like the data capture space and 3 Gaussian splats and all that fun nerdy stuff. But you're actually the first real artist that's doing some
No,
cool stuff.
no, I appreciate that. I still have the imposter syndrome of being an artist, so I appreciate you calling me that.
No, you shouldn't. Yeah, your work is excellent. So I think that's a great place to start. Do you want to tell us kind of like maybe a detailed story of your start and what got you specifically into extended reality from I believe you started as a painter.
Uh,
Is that correct?
yeah. I can go like right from the beginning if you want, or you want me just to jump in where AR starts getting interesting.
I think start at the beginning, man. Like I'd love to hear your story like pre extended reality.
Okay, sure. I just don't want to, like rant on the last 30 years of my life or something like that. If you're really looking
No,
for
you're good,
two or
man.
three.
Yeah, tell us the
Yes.
story.
So you're right in that I started off as a street artist. I sort of stumbled into as I like didn't do very well at school. Sort of stumbled into creativity and like this. Although it sounds silly, like discovering that could even be a career. Sort of like discovered that by accident. So then tried to get better as an artist without having like any proper training. So that's where the street art came in because I didn't really have to like ask for permission. I could just like go out and do this stuff. So
Sure.
um left uni, tried to become a street artist, realized super quickly that I didn't have like the business knowledge, like as most artists do. Like they just want to create, they don't know how to market, they don't know invoices and taxes and all that sort of business. So um decided to get a business mentor, had a business mentor and a full-time job for a couple of years. And that was during a point where I was just like experimenting with my art, sort of like behind the scenes. So I was looking for an art style that was when you saw it, or that was like instantly recognizable. Like all great artists have something, and you see it, and within a second, you know who that artist is. So like tried lots. Like I'm talking just every type of art that you could possibly try. I like dipped my toe into that water, and I was making denim jackets for celebrities to wear on stage, mainly music. And then I got this ad for like a really primitive augmented reality experience. It was just like 2D pictures and videos. And I thought that looked really cool in terms of like an art style.
Yeah.
It was unique because like it didn't exist before. So like there was no artist previously who had a style like that. So I thought if I could combine a physical jacket with like a augmented reality experience, you hold your phone up to something and something cool happens, that would get like a good reaction. And the reaction from that first jacket was like significantly better than anything else that I'd done in like the past 10, 15 years or whatever. So I enjoyed the process. So I just like kept doing it and sort of like stumbled into augmented reality. So as you can imagine, from like a technical standpoint, still a lot to learn, steep learning curve from the
Yeah.
technical side, but being able to bring to that like artistry or creativity with it, I think has uh, created a sort of little path for myself of like combining those two things.
Yeah, that's a cool story. I think that there's gonna be a lot of people who can relate to that. There's so many artists out there that I think are starting to dip their feet into, like, mixing their art with technology, which is not always something I'd say most artists don't, go, "Hey, I wanna start working technology into my artwork." But if you find out it's really fun, and there's, like, these really rich experiences that you can build with your art that you couldn't do with a canvas, which is great, and I love that you kind of found that. And yeah, there's still, unlike the apparel AR, which I was gonna ask you about, there's still very few people doing that. It's so cool because you can have these really interesting like social experiences with people. Where they'll, it's like I don't know, we'll have to get used to like someone like walking up to you and like scanning your shirt
Yeah,
that you don't
yeah, I
know,
can
and
see
like,
that.
"Okay, check out your shirt."
The thing that I find but specifically about fashion, I think it's really interesting from like a sustainability point of view. Like that jacket that you've got on now, you might buy and maybe wear for a year or so and then throw out, especially like a t-shirt. They're obviously getting thrown out much more frequently. But if you had an AR experience where you could hold up your phone to that white t-shirt that you've got on now and like something comes out of it, and then what comes out of it changes every month or every quarter, then like the longer you have it, the more value you're getting for your product, so you're less likely to throw it away. So from a sustainability point of view, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. But just from like a consumer point of view, that's like a cool experience because you'll be showing off every month. Look at this thing that my t-shirt does that yours doesn't. It's a bit of a no-brainer. But as you said, there's not many people doing it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it, and I think that's so important to, um there's a lot of people out there are afraid of technology. They always have been, right? And I think that's just like a wonderful exhibit of like how do we blend like new technologies and make things better. And so, being on the conscious side of the apparel industry, which we know is like the fast fashion industry is just like they dump so much clothing a year that no one ever wears because they're just like pumping stuff out. And I love to have this, like, really intimate connection with, like, a piece of clothing. It's like putting patches, on something, and it's just like this it's like your safety blanket. I think it's really cool. I love it. I think there's a lot of, opportunity out there for artists, who do stuff like this to work with big brands, which I think you already kinda have dabbled in. So,
Mhm.
I think that's a wonderful, like, segue for an artist to get into something, as a business, like, kinda like what you mentioned earlier is, transitioning from just an artist that doesn't have a business sense to having something that's business related. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like, if you're perhaps not an artist, but a creative or a freelancer, if you're looking to be an expert in a field, then if you were a photographer, just as an example, then like you would need to study for 30 plus years to be at like the top 1% of that industry because people have been doing it for 30 plus years. But within XR, it was really because it's only just begun. There isn't too many people like leading the charge. When I started out, there was like even fewer. So it really only took a few years to be considered in that sort of like top bracket. But even now, still, if you could specialize in fashion or music or something or attractions and just work on AR, then brands will, if that's what it is that you want to go down the commercial route, then you're in a good position to become like that thought leader in that space.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. What I really admire about your shift is that what you said, that steep learning curve.
Mhm.
Going from someone who's an artist to someone who has to learn how to like use all these different technical platforms. It's like it's a kind of intimidating process because I've done it. So I've learned all these different SDKs and modeling softwares, and like there's a lot to learn there just
Mhm.
to take what something that you normally do with your hands to have to do it with like a mouse and a keyboard, and kind of like starting to mix those two things. So I always have a lot of appreciation for people who take the time to learn this stuff. Um, and do you have anything
on that process that might be like valuable to people who are getting into it that might help them feel like it's not as big of an information mountain to climb to
Yeah,
start applying it to their art.
yeah, absolutely. I think personally for me, there's been a pattern of just being curious about how things are made. And I think learning has been, well, just like enthusiastic about learning has been a huge reason for any credentials or success that I've had. Just this open-mindedness of going in and just like trying to pick something up, not just from XR, but anything that I've done prior to that. But the jump from, if you're going from a traditional artist or videographer, photographer, graphic designer, whatever it might be, if you're interested in XR, the jump is not huge. Truthfully, like the really complicated XR experiences, obviously, but my first jump into XR was I'd done some work in Premiere Pro, I'd done some videography, and the software that I used, is called Art.Reality, is just mainly 2D video and 2D like PNGs. So like I'm using assets that I've already been using for the past few years, and I'm aligning that. Yes, I'm just having to like align them in a 3D space, but that's like something you could pick up in an afternoon, especially with like the YouTube Academy, education stuff
Yeah,
that is YouTube. So then moving on from that, like the next level would be, how do you make 3D models? Well, there's lots of 3D model tutorials. There's lots of 3D model designers you can work with. There's lots of programs where you can put in a picture and it'll just spit out a 3D model now. So like that jump isn't even that big either. I'd say the biggest jump really is technically, like coding obviously is huge. It's not something that I've learned. So I work with freelancers in that rate, but also Blender, that like 3D software. If you really want to make your artwork in
yeah.
3D and you want to make it look really good, then it's just, you just got to put hours and, make lots of rubbish artwork and then slowly, make it a little bit better each time. But those are the big jumps. But starting, honestly, it's not as big as you might think.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's so many entry points, right? There's so many ways to do it. Whereas I think when me and you started doing this, like you are much further into it as than I am, but um, I had to like learn like so many different softwares just to
Mhm.
achieve like the idea and the information curve, the learning curve, sorry, was really steep. And now we're seeing like the ability to go into like one platform and do everything. That's it's kind of like where it's going. It was very parsed out prior, and we even just lost like Spark AR, which I know you're familiar with, like that going down. So, but I think that people have they're entering after this era of like all this trial and error, and there's like all these different platforms, and it's getting more consolidated and
Mhm.
far more capable. Like you said, you can just go into like Midjourney, create an image, take that into Rodin, create that into a 3D model, and then you can start building like art experiences with that, which is pretty great. But I think you'll need something like a little bit more in depth, like Blender. Is that what you use to do like more custom experiences?
Uh, That's what I'm making my artwork in, making like 3D artwork, and then I'm taking those 3D models, and you're right, there are different platforms. So specifically about my artwork, this is like not brand work at the moment, but anything that I make, is going to be used on web mainly. So that's either going to be like 8th Niantic, or which I'm very, very slowly building out templates of like my own creations, like hosting my own AR experiences, just so you're not reliant on like a third party. You don't have to pay for, um, 8th license, that sort of stuff. So that's been something that I've been working with a group of really talented people, much more talented than I am, in the past few months. And it's a really, again, steep learning curve, but also really interesting because I've always been at the limit of just what platform, like a Lens Studio or 8th or whatever it might be, but like understanding how these are made and like actually how a target tracking experience like actually works, and then building one for myself, and then like, okay, well, on web, what can you do that you can't? Obviously, you get a lot more information on the back end, but because I'm custom building a target tracker and it's not a all size fits one platform like the other AR experiences, platforms have to be, that it just means you can do a lot more. So it's like a very exciting, again, uphill battle educationally. But I will just put
Yeah,
on, sorry, just to
that's cool.
go full circle with this rant, is that for the learning, if there's a freelancer, I'm not sure if your audience is like artists or freelancers or just creators in general, but the picking up skills, even if you dabble in XR on like one platform, but you just learn about how these things, like spatial experiences work, that once you've learned it, it's just another bow to your arsenal, really. So in terms of, I know the platforms change and clients like demands change, but there's, from my experience of like working with videography and working with art and then bringing that over into XR, it just like opens up other doors. So even if you do a little bit in XR and then you want to go into AI, that stuff will still be really useful for you to know. And like once you know it, you know it. So I wouldn't see it as time wasted.
Yeah, life has a mysterious way of weaving your past back into your present with all the things you learned you thought you'd never use. You're like, oh, I'm glad I learned that now.
And honestly, like, really creative things happen. Because if everybody's just getting the inspiration from one place, well, everybody's coming from like a pure tech background, and yes, they know how to code, but perhaps they don't know anything about architecture, so they don't know how to like lay these experiences out. That you
Yeah.
happened to be an architect at uni for a year before you dropped out, you can bring that to XR, and it's just like you'll be making something completely different because obviously you've got a unique perspective on these things. So you're right, it's interesting how you just like piece these things together, and it just hopefully brings something new to the table.
Yeah, a lot of magic happens when you mix different synapse wirings.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool to be around people who are not like you, because like you said, it inspires unique experiences to come out of it that otherwise, if you're like a more homogenous group of thinkers, you wouldn't have come to that conclusion, which is pretty great. I think that's a good message. Um, on the note of your work,
Mhm.
in the intro, we talk about how you've worked with some pretty big brands. Would you like to tell the audience about some of those things that you've worked on with some of those companies?
Yes, absolutely. So when I first quit my job, it's like the start of COVID, I was freelancing, creating AR experiences for brands, obviously just to pay the bills. And that was like mostly marketing, like social media filters. And then as the demand for that grew, that kind of formed a little design studio called Dime, which I was then creative director of, which then allows me to kind of split my time between my artwork, which is obviously personal projects that I'm putting out, and then Dime, which is the more commercial offering, like taking all the knowledge learned over here with the artwork and putting it into commercial experiences. So that was up until about 2 years ago. That was like only marketing. So like uh, an AR a component that's like part of an already ongoing campaign. And then in the past 2 years, that has marketing still maybe like 50%, but it's interesting that like as the tech gets better and as more brands like understand the benefits of using AR, it's the briefs are crossing over into more like business strategy, or like how does AR achieve goals. So that's like virtual try on, like does it sell more products if you have virtual try on? Do you reduce returns? They're the kind of questions that like keep getting asked. um In-store experiences, like these like interactive experiences that are kind of tied into virtual try on. Um, there's still the social media elements of how can we get people to engage with product, brand, TV show, whatever it might be, or promote the TV show. But then the kind of briefs that I'm having, like, I'm just thinking of the most recent ones are like almost tied into data capture, where it's, is there a value exchange, say like at an attraction where somebody might have a great interactive experience, and then be happy to give their email over to get the final picture back, and then you've been able to
Oh,
really capture some data, but then also perhaps like learn a little bit more about that person based on, or how, not just specifically that person, but people in general, how they interact with your attraction. So then there's questions like for theme parks, it's like, do people stay at theme parks for longer if they have these like interactive experiences? Do they spend more in the park? They're like the kind of questions that kind of being asked at the moment. But in terms of
mhm.
brands, yeah, been very, very fortunate. And I think it's been the artist kind of led the charge as of becoming essentially a thought leader. And then we've never done any outbound inquiries. Everything's been coming and knocking up these big brands, the Disney's, Amazon's, Nike's, Adidas, Gymshark. Like the list is paramount. The list is the thing I'm most proud of. They're knocking on our door and asking, how do we use this tool? Or we've seen your artwork, or we've seen your fashion thing, and we want to do something else or something similar, So Dime is super exciting, and it's kind of allows me to kind of pay the bills or fund. Really, it funds the personal projects that I want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just there's so much we could talk about with that. With the there's just so many opportunities. I'm like an AR guy. Like that's my thing.
Mhm.
So I see what you see. The future, just speaking with like working with brands,
Yeah.
there's so many applications for AR that
Yeah.
they're interested in that you could get into as a specialist in. And there's really not a lot of people doing it. So it's like I'm like looking around at people. It's like, man, get in now, because it's so much easier to get ahead. And like I guess one thing I wanted to say while you were talking was, there's only one way to find out. These brands are asking, will people stay at the theme park longer? Well, let's build an AR experience and find out.
Just to tack on to what you were saying there, I think there's a benefit in not being super niche. AR is obviously niche within itself, but it's good to be kind of protected. But you don't want to go straight into like one industry, just in case there's, nobody buys any fashion because there's a recession or something like that. That you don't want to just be fashion related. But in terms of applications, you're right. There's so much. Even what I've just listed there, like virtual try on or like placing products, not just like wearing them in your home before you buy them. But then we've even done projects about presenting. Like, how do you do something different with the way that you pitch? So we did I don't think I can particularly say who, but it was a pitch for a sponsor for a t-shirt for a sports business. And it's like they did the whole pitch to the sponsor using AR just to obviously show off, how just innovative they are as a brand. But that's something that not many people are thinking of, like how to use AR to present. And that's where I really get creatively my kicks from Dime, is because nobody's really thought about that before. Nobody's really thought about how to use it at attractions other than maybe like Disney or Universal. So when these briefs come in, it's usually there isn't much to go off. So it kind of gives you free creative license to be like, I think it could look like this. And, if it proves to be right, that's like you're setting a standard for how things can be done in the future. So it's quite rewarding creatively.
Yeah, it really is so cool, man. I love AR so much. I just the use cases are particularly interesting, like, and they're gonna change a bit because what we're talking about now for the viewers is predominantly web AR, which is an experience that you'll have through your phone screen, right? So you'll point your phone at something, and it'll be triggered by an image or a QR code or a statue that's it uses image recognition, and it will basically figure out your geolocation, and it will pop up. But this is all done through like your phone. As soon, and not the not so distant future, we'll be working with glasses. And we just saw Meta drop their prototype Orion, and I'm sure Apple's going to be doing something. And there's rumors of a few others. We have X Reels. Snapchat's working on theirs, have been for a long time. So that's like the natural succession, is to move into the form factor that we wear on our face, so we can be hands free doing these things, and it'll be a lot more of a natural way of experiencing things in your environment, which I'm pretty stoked for. Um, I was going to ask you how you felt about the transition between going from like a web AR creator to like a glasses creator.
Well, first of all, it's nice to meet somebody who's also just passionate about AR. There aren't too many people that I know, like in my friendship circle, who are just like nerdy, like.
Oh man,
So yeah, so it's nice to meet somebody, and I could honestly talk about it all day. I'm sure we will after this. But the glasses is the thing that gets me excited, because, and I say this in meetings, and when I talk about my artwork as well. It's frustrating to me that AR, if it saves my artwork specifically, like I've got this big canvas and like you're looking at it through this thing to there. It's like super unnatural. Um, and what I say in meetings for Dime is that we're enjoying augmented reality already on our phones, but we're really making something for a different format. Like we just happen to be using the phones, like it's not built for phones, although it's crazy what phones can do. There's a limit to like how much processing or like how much tracking or like how big the cameras are, because the cameras are not really supposed to be doing AR. They're just supposed to be capturing, nice pictures. So in terms of how natural it will feel when you just put a pair of glasses on and you don't have to move your camera around before you place an object. It just like appears. And you can do stuff with your hands, like interact with it. Like that's the thing that gets me incredibly excited. It's why I make the artwork specifically on web, because we don't know we'll have apps in the future, or we don't know what that crossover between phones and glasses will look like. So I don't want to be tied to a third party platform. I know that it's probably a safe bet to see if there'll be a web browser of sorts in the glasses experience. So building it on web for phone at the moment, but then making it easy to then transfer over to glasses should that day come. And I
Yeah.
do about that a lot, specifically with my artwork, because if you're buying an artwork and it comes with an AR experience, it probably won't be using phones in 10 years' time, 15 years' time. We definitely won't be using phones. So it's like trying to think about the artwork in terms of like, what does an AR experience look like? A lifetime AR experience look like, trying to like future proof it, which is impossible, but try and do my best.
Yeah, I understand the struggle on that, like trying to think ahead on something that's still being developed. But what's nice about that, which is maybe a bit reassuring, is like a lot of the development I've been seeing with like Unity and these other platforms is um, they're becoming really accepting of all these different file formats and types, and like just dumping things from things is now becoming a lot. It's like dumping something from one software to another is becoming really easy. And before it was like a nightmare, like nothing would transfer. You have to take this file, make it into this file, and then it, like
Mhm.
doesn't, these textures don't come through. It's like, it's like, I know Spark AR was like that. Like so much stuff didn't come through from Blender, but we're getting closer to that. So I think that that there's a nice little safety blanket there that in the near future we'll be able to, like, for something that you've built for like web AR will be able to easily be drug over and made into like the glasses format and relaunched, and then you'll still have that connection between your piece and that the art piece and the AR experience.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I think that in terms of like crossing over into some sort of like mainstream barrier, there needs to be software that is as easy to make an AR experience as it is to like make a video. And they're obviously working on that. But at the moment, there's a high barrier to like really technical experiences. And
Yeah.
as the tech gets better, as more people get interested, start making 3D files and start using things like Unity and Blender, I think that education barrier will come down, but the platforms themselves need to be just like make it as easy as possible. Because as you said, none of these platforms really talk to each other particularly well. So I think that'll be something in the future that just gets a little bit better.
Yeah, it seems like it has been. We're having this like era of a bit of turmoil where we're seeing like Meta shut down Spark, and then are they going to build something new? A lot of companies are like exploring, different avenues and ways of moving forward into the extended reality space. Meta spent tons of money, and they're like, are we going to have to shift here, so that we keep on track with the XR. So I'm hoping that all of that stuff kind of like settles out, and we have this like second wave of innovation and extended reality building, like we had like the last couple of years were awesome, but
Yeah,
it's kind of died down a little bit.
yeah, definitely. I think that you're right in that maybe 5 years ago till maybe like the last 2 years was just like everybody was excited about using augmented reality and things were flying. And then maybe in like the last 18 months, there seems to be less. I think there's a lot of external factors, but budgets and that sort of recession and that sort of stuff. But I get the impression that people tried AR, perhaps tried to do it cheap, or so they just used somebody and it just had like a rubbish experience, or um, defining like the ROI, this is specifically with brands, defining the ROI on AR is tricky, which is why that growth from marketing, from Dan's point of view, that growth from marketing, which AR was always like a nice to have, like, oh, if we've got budget, we'll do a selfie. And then the budget inevitably shrinks and like the selfie's first thing to go. Whereas if you can position AR as like, what is the ROI? So like, what's the business goal? If it's, you want people to stay in the theme park for longer because you want them to spend more money or their satisfaction goes up, then you can track with AR experiences or with surveys and stuff, like how much people did you use the experience? Yes. How long did you stay for? How much money did you spend? You can track those things. So if you can prove the ROI, the data
Yeah,
side thing is what brands I've found in the past 12, 18 months of like, as soon as you start talking about that sort of stuff, that there is hiccup because they, they obviously want to get,
that's how they operate.
yeah,
Which is understandable as a business. If you're going to invest in something, you want to see a return on it. Whether that's financial return or a brand security return, where someone's, I look at it like, there's two ways you profit off it from a business. And I see AR as like, I don't think there is anything out there that is as good as or has the potential like AR has to keep like time on brand with a
yeah,
potential client or with current clients and brand immersion, right? So looking at a billboard or like looking at like a Nike shoe and playing with it and turning it around and like actually interacting with this thing, like, that's a way more intimate brand experience that's like, you don't have to, like, put a million billboards up. They're gonna have, like, a more impactful experience holding the product in VR than they are gonna look at, like, 1,000 billboards. You drive past a million billboards a day, and you don't even know what they are. It's
yeah.
like it's pretty much like a dead art of advertising, and then this is, like, the new frontier, and it's far more encapsulating, to a potential client to be able to have like a 3D experience with the brand. And it's the time on brand too. It's like, imagine, I think Don made something like this where you can go on a running trail and you collect all these points and you can spend them at, the Nike store for like 10% off or whatever once you collect 50 little Nike icons. And that's like an hour or two of brand immersion that you can't
Yeah.
get that with the billboard or any other marketing material. So like that alone is like valuable to a brand, is just retaining the attention of the clients or potential clients.
Yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree. Not just from the brand point of view, as you've said, like the amount of time somebody would spend, but just how close that person would feel. Say, to use your Nike example, you the company is really providing a cool experience, and it just happens to be sponsored. It just happens to be Nike branded. So like you're going to feel, as you to compare to the billboards, something forced upon you. It's like, this is actually something really cool. And like, I like gaming and I like running. So these two things go together. And then the added bonus is that you get maybe a Nike discount, but it's like, you're just providing a cool experience and the brand's reaping the rewards, the customers reaping the rewards. It's like a win-win. We did an
Exactly.
experience with Tommy Hilfiger, and it was like a treasure hunt, using Niantic, so it's using the same tech as Pokemon Go. And it was a similar experience in Berlin and in London. And you were getting 10, 15 minutes. It was a small experience. 10, 15 minutes of people going around London and Berlin and then ending up in the store. So like when we talk about it, when we show that example to brands, we say, how long would you pay in terms of like social video or something like that? How much would you pay for 10 uninterrupted minutes of just sole focus on your brand from a consumer? And that, would, from a social ad spend point of view, would be incredibly high, certainly higher than the retainers that we put out there. So I think,
Yeah. Plus the
yeah,
added bonus of exit through the gift shop at the end is
yeah, it's a real win-win. So that when we start talking, I think there's just a learning curve from, if we're talking again specifically about brands, like a learning curve from the old guard who don't know technically like how you can prove brand loyalty, or how you can prove like what does dwell time. If you say 15 minutes dwell time to them, and they're usually looking at like 8 seconds retention on a video, they just don't understand it. So we try and put the
yeah.
terminology in like the old marketing ways, but then there's also from their side, and this is not all brands. All the brands we work with are like excited, they understand it, and they get it. But the brands that we don't work with, where we pitched it and they, just the creative director loves it, but the finance guy doesn't get it. It's just there's probably going to be like a learning curve for them, and I imagine they'll fall behind and then realize that they've got to do it, and then that's when they'll start picking up this sort of what all this XR terminology actually means.
Yeah, that I think, and the what's really exciting about, hearing some of that early excitement and people getting on board, especially with big brands, is that this is just getting started. Like there's more business than I think there will be AR creators for that business for a long time. Like, and because it takes time to learn how to build these things and do it well. So starting now is great. Because I mean, you got some track here. Like, you're not behind. If you want to start getting into this now, there's still only, like, a small subset of creators that are really good at doing AR for big brands. Like, there's all these like mid cap companies that want this too, and it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. Especially when glasses become like an accepted form factor and a way of going about our daily lives, which I think we'll get to in a pretty short amount of time. Meta Ray-Bans is having like record sales. So like people are getting comfortable with like having glasses on their face and using it to interface with AI and ask questions and take pictures. And that's like, the toe dip into like full on AR glasses, which I think we'll have in like, less than 5 years, that are like highly capable.
Yeah, I agree. Well, part of me's got my fingers crossed. I think there'll definitely be some people using them in 5 years. Perhaps for everybody to jump on board might be a bit longer. But I think
Mhm.
for creators and for brands, not only does it take a bit of time to learn the skills, but also just build up that reputation. So like when we do get to the period where everybody's wearing glasses and then the marketing form factor changes because we're not maybe just using pictures and videos on social because we're spending a lot of that. There's all this new opportunity for XR experiences that being one of the people who are doing it, say for 5 years, say 5 years till the glasses come. If you've been doing it for the past 5 years, you're really going to be in that top 1%. You're going to have that brand. You're going to have that knowledge. It's not just the technical knowledge. It's like the user journey and the storytelling that comes along with those things that you also need to learn. That for brands, it's exactly the same. You can't just, let's say, wait 5 years and then everybody's wearing glasses and then you're starting from zero, because there's brands who are doing it now and investing heavily into XR whilst it's on phones and reaping the rewards now, who are only going to reap further rewards when everybody jumps over to glasses and everybody and they already have like a great understanding of like how these experiences work, what to look for, what works, what doesn't. They use the journey for these type of experiences. There'll be the brands that win big, and these like big giants who are too slow, will be those brands that get left behind. Essentially, will be starting from, and they'll have to invest heavily at that point to try and keep up.
Yeah, I like the way you think, sir. We have a lot of we have a lot of common thoughts on that. Um, yeah, start now is like what we're saying. It's like it will pay off. It will pay off. And I'm pretty excited to see this transformation from, face down in our phones to this face up generation, generational change where, we're interacting with the people around us again and the environment around us in ways we never have before. And it's this natural succession of like implementing tech into our lives to go from this 2D, form factor into the third dimension. I cannot wait for that. And it's going to be really fun to watch what that catalyst event is, because, every technology has one, like the internet, et cetera, that like everyone was like, I got to get that. And, that the thesis behind that for me is like something really cool is going to happen in AR, and everyone around you is going to be like, what is that? What are you looking at? And be like, oh, it's this. And then be like, well, how do I do it? Like, well, you can't see it unless you buy a pair of glasses. And like everyone's going to go out and buy a pair of glasses so they can experience this thing. And who knows what that is yet, but um, whoever does that's going to do pretty well.
Let's hope it's a art exhibition somewhere in the future. I don't know if it will be like one specific thing. If I think about the internet, then it's just the many use cases or utility that comes with it. Same with the smartphone and VR, AR glasses at the moment. I really feel like, I mean, say VR is obviously gaming. Um,
Yeah.
and it's trying to push into entertainment. Like Oculus is trying to push into entertainment and productivity with their Apple Vision Pro. That when you start getting experiences that are better than like the current offering. So if the Apple Vision Pro's working capabilities allowed me to either make better work or produce better work, or the Zoom calls didn't feel as 2D, like it felt like you were sat on the sofa behind me, like right here, then, and that's like one case study, but then perhaps hanging out with my friends later or shopping. And shopping, I don't even think is a difficult thing to beat, because I think online shopping is for just rubbish. Like you just have some pictures online to pick from. That's not even particularly hard to beat. But when you start beating a couple of those things, then you just, why would I get a phone when I can get these glasses that aren't much more expensive and like the experience is better? But that's what has to happen. Is just you have to get whatever the current use case that you're using your laptop for or phone for is, like what can AR, XR, VR do the same but do it better? And you can see that they're working on that with like hanging out in Horizon on Oculus as a social gathering sort of experience, but
Yeah.
it's not there at the moment. But
It's
that's
not, but it's cool.
when those things start getting better.
Yeah, I think we'll have like, we'll have that like slow kind of like on ramp. Like some things will be better than others, and then some things will be maybe as good as the other. So it's like, would you rather do it in, on a phone, or would you rather do this on, a HMD or a pair of glasses? And I think that'll like kind of like get people in, and then it'll just take off at some point. But like you sparked a cool thought. I think that maybe in a few years, me and you could jump back on, do another podcast, but do it completely like in Apple Vision Pro, like virtually in the same
Yeah.
space, which would be really cool.
I'm so down for that. And the reason that I think that's a great idea is because for anybody who's listening or watching, they could then put on their Apple Vision Pro and essentially be sat in the room with us. So like that's just an easy case study of podcasting, how it could be so much better. And you could actually feel like you were part. I mean, it sounds like a part of the conversation because you're listening in, but you could actually be here whilst we're having, even live, maybe, like having that
Yeah,
conversation.
that's what I was thinking.
So yeah, this is what I'm saying. It doesn't take much to do better than what we currently have, but we're just not there yet.
Yeah, that sounds so cool. I'm stoked. Um, I figure I'll bring up your website real quick, and then I got some more questions I wanted to ask you. All right, so here's your website.
Yeah.
And so if you want to go check out some of Dodd's work, you can go here at www.dodds.com. It's down there on the lower ticker. And you can scroll down here. It'll tell you a lot about his life, and you can stay connected here. I thought there's a really cool thing to bring up. Oh, socials. If you need any socials, they're down here, the bottom left. And this is pretty cool. So if you go to his about section, which is really cool. I love all the purples. It's one of my favorite colors. There's this really cool little experience here, and maybe I'll show this. I'll show it. If you scan this with your phone, you get to do a really cool augmented reality experience anywhere that you're at, and it has this little portal, and you can touch anywhere on your screen, and it will drop the portal, and then you can kind of jump through that portal and look inside of what he has prepared for you guys to take a look at. It's really interesting. And then here's your Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was pretty awesome. You did something in Shanghai recently, right?
Yeah. So that is the second show that I've done in Shanghai with a company called Molt, who are focusing on digital art, creating experiences for exhibitions for digital artists. And then there's potentially a third one happening this year. And each one of them is getting slightly bigger and slightly better than the last one. So this third one is quite exciting. But again, as somebody who, I never went to art school, so it's only really in the last year that I've started calling myself an artist. And I don't do it that often either. But like having a show in Shanghai, just like on the other side of the world was a real pinch me moment. And just the idea of people experiencing my artwork on just like on the other side of the world is just crazy to me. And I hope that novelty never wears off, because yeah, it was a real highlight of the work I've done so far.
Yeah, it looked pretty cool. So it was like you kinda had all your art pieces strung up on, like, in, like, on a couple pieces of, like wire?
Mhm.
And was that
Yeah.
hanging out somewhere in, like, a square or something where people could then, use their phones to interact?
Yeah, they'd rented out this massive space. It wasn't just me, I think it was like 10, 12 other artists, but this little DODDZ section. But the venues that they're getting, I forget where the district that this was in, but the venues that are getting bigger and bigger, and they're just very impressive buildings. So just the artwork in it, just yeah, just looked amazing to me. So I'm like a contributor. I'm not like particularly involved in the designing of the exhibition, but um, there was like
Yeah.
also like a TV screen playing some of the AR experiences of other artworks on loop as well. So it's quite cool.
Was all the art there, extended reality, or is it a mix?
Yeah, all of it. So all of my artwork has a physical thing, sculpture, painting, whatever it might be, and then there'll be a QR code or something to get an AR experience on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I think, what was my favorite this is my favorite one, if I might add. Let's see your artwork here. You can also check out his art here if you click art. You scroll down. I think this one's my favorite. The first date. It's such a sick one.
That's
I
fine.
love it. Yeah, the colors are great. I love that. Is that Painterly or where you got that lit?
Uh, So the style's changing, but there's a few things. To go back to the color purple that you mentioned before, that
Yeah.
is intentionally the color uh, theme for I guess the brand, but all the artwork. It's had these like pastel colors to try and offset the augmented reality, like digital, technical, like quite intimidating to some people. So like the color scheme, I think tones down that level of technology. And the painterly effect is this the style itself is changing. So that was originally like a lot of Photoshop creating painterly effects to the textures and then building those out in Blender. But now I'm doing a lot of the painterly effect directly in Blender. But the reason for that is, and really the reason that I have physical and digital artwork is, to me, AR is at its best when it's like interacting with the environment around you. So like if you hold your phone up to a painting and a flower grows out of it, like that is mind blowing. Even to me still now, I still think that's crazy. So I also think
Yeah.
that it kind of perfectly, as an art medium, perfectly describes how we live at the moment, where we have one foot in the physical world, one foot in the digital. So I'm always going to have a physical and a digital component to the artwork. And the painterly effect is kind of, again, trying to blur those lines between, is it a painting? Is it digital? Is it is it something that's made on a computer? Is it handmade? And I just think that blurring of those physical and digital lines is like the perfect metaphor for the world that we live in at the moment.
Yeah.
And with the glasses, probably even more so in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's really nice. I think that's a great point. Um, I'd like to ask you, tagging off that and like everything that we've talked about so far, like what through all of this has been like the standout, extra unique moment for you of all the things you've experienced so far with your art and extended reality? That is like maybe your favorite.
That's a really good question. I think that's a really good question. So the reason that I make artwork, like at its core, the mission or what it, like the kick that I get out of it is seeing somebody else experience the artwork and it evoke some sort of emotion. So if a stranger who I've never met can relate to the emotion that I was feeling when I made that artwork, or if it provokes some sort of joy, happiness, there's a lot of positivity around the artwork. Like that's where that human connection is where I get the excitement for making artwork comes from me. So following that thread, um, probably the biggest thing I've done as an artist was a show in London a few years ago, which was a digital fashion show where there was no first runway show with no physical clothes. So the audience held their phone up to the models and using body tracking on Snapchat. It was in partnership with Snapchat. The clothes were applied digitally. And the reaction on people's faces, having not seen something like that before, was very fulfilling for me as an artist, but also it did quite well in terms of exposure, or it just was well received, I'll say. So that's probably on paper the biggest thing that I've done, but the thing that gets me the most excited as a nerd is that I don't think that I've particularly cracked it yet, but I would like to make a film and hold your phone up to or wear a pair of glasses, and the story comes out of the TV screen and into your environment. Because I think that is such a shocking, surprising experience that again blows my mind, even just thinking about if I was watching a TV show and it just started happening around me, and even if I interacted with it, maybe that changed the outcome of the story. I think
Mhm.
that's I've dabbled in that, and both of the times that I've done that, it's brought me uh I've been quite proud of the outcome, but I don't think they're quite right yet. So I'm hoping in the future. I can imagine the reaction from people interacting with that, watching a film and being able to embed themselves in that story rather than
Yeah.
like a static artwork or something like that. I think will be really cool. So I have no plans on doing that at the moment either. So that might be something for next year.
Yeah, so both of those things, awesome. I think that that is a great core purpose, like behind everything that you're doing is, especially if you're going to work with technologies, is the experience that people are having and the connection that you can have with people that you don't have the maybe necessarily like the form factor to have yet, or it just went missing through the years of using phones where everyone just kind of isolated. I think there's this like beautiful future, right? Of where we can start connecting with each other again, because it feels like we've just lost a lot of that. And I think 3D experiences and like AR glasses have such a huge potential for bringing that back in so many creative ways, and in so many like emotionally connective ways. Like seeing like someone's aura around them, and they can express themselves through like these different like visual form factors that we can experience with them. And it's like, there's a lot of like there's some like really cool like mental health stuff that we could do with like a lot of that. It's like you never know what someone's going through, and I think that, like, the ability to, like, visualize that if they so, like, want to, and, like, be able to, like, communicate with people their feelings through visuals is, like, I think such a cool way of doing it, we don't currently really have, right?
Yeah, and we talked, I think, at the top of this about just like the many different ways that you could use augmented reality as a tool, and one of those ways, I think, mental health is one of those ways. I saw this great case study. I forget it was a old people's home in Canada. I forget the name of it, but they were the perhaps it was an old people's home. It was in Canada, I remember that much at least, but it was for the older generation who was suffering with loneliness, um, using augmented reality to have digital pets. And their happiness level basically rocketed because they didn't feel alone, even though it's digital and you do blur those lines. And anybody who's played a video game knows how emotionally invested you get in these characters. And it's just like really heartwarming to see how you could use this tool and apply it to these old problems and come up with like new solutions that work. And I mean, that's just one that just came to mind. I haven't thought about it in a long time, but that came to mind when you were just talking there. But there's many, many different ways that you could use it, not just for, I guess, a commercial gain.
It's the beautiful part about it is it's not
Mm.
just for brand use, it's for so many different things, and it's for whatever you can come up with. That's the coolest part about it is, like, it's the most creative people win, like, the tools are becoming democratized, like, you won't need to be a coder, like, you're going to be able to build experiences with your native language, just speaking English, and you'll be able to do it with hand gestures and talking to something and build it in 3D and then be able to use it or experience, that on the fly, and I think that's just, like, it's gonna open up so many doors for people to, like, to for all sorts of reasons, social reasons or work reasons or, personal mental health reasons. If you wanna, like, build your own therapist or wherever it might be, you run wild with your creativity, and, like, the capability to do that is the tool that's being built, which is, AI and AR, being combined together. That's so powerful. I'm super excited.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I could just, this is, I want to give this a piece of advice because it's only something that I think that I've learned recently, in the past few months, and it's that. So this is for somebody who might be listening who's like starting out, and perhaps coming from like a creative background, not a technical background. That I think I spent the first 4 or 5 years trying too hard on the technical side, obviously to just like learn, and I think part of it is just to show off that look, I've learned this thing, and me thinking it needs to be as complicated as possible in order to be good. But really, the simple idea that just is translated to just like a great idea translated to an AR experience, and especially if it's going to be something that's like used widely, the simple, the better. Like we're in it every day, so we might be thinking something's too straightforward, but 95% of people are not using it every day. It's still like blowing their mind. And if you just have this like really good, simple idea, it doesn't have to be the most technically creative. Like it can even be just 2D assets at this point. But if like that idea is good, then like the story will tell itself and it'll be a great experience. So there's something that I just learned. I think trying to like dial down these things don't have to do everything, but just get that core idea first, and then the AR side of it's usually not as complicated as the stuff that I've been making probably the past few years.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I think anyone who does content creation has learned that lesson. There's obviously things that are complicated that do really great, but like
Mhm.
yeah, I spent a lot of hours making some videos that got no views, and then I spent like 20 minutes making one, and it'll get like 100,000 views or something. It's like, yeah, all right, well, interesting.
I think there's
Sometimes it's just the simplicity is good.
yeah, yeah, especially trying to get if it's a piece of content, trying to get it to translate. Especially if we're talking about AR, like it just definitely needs to be as simple as possible. And honestly, I've slowed up the content creation because coming up with a good idea is so time, and like making that piece of content is so time consuming that like it's getting to the point where I don't want to just put something out for like the sake of it. Like try and think of that like good idea first, and the video there might be similar to the AR experience, like quite straightforward. And that's something I'm looking at the moment is a little bit more about how do you evoke those emotions? Like going back to the complete flip side now to like the design and the user journey, not necessarily the technical part. Like
Right.
how do you evoke joy through just full stop, and then like how does that translate to the AR experience? So I'm finding that super fulfilling because it's then making decisions like easier for me. Or like how you, this is again for content or for AR, like just how you get people invested in whatever story it is that you're trying to tell. It's just an
Yeah.
interesting part of my creative journey that I'm kind of like learning about again, at the moment.
Another great tip: people first, tech second. I
Yeah.
think that's definitely the way to build, and it's especially because it's for people. If you're building, if you're thinking tech first, you're gonna miss, usually. If you're not thinking about the end user, that's like paramount. So yeah, that's an awesome tip. So one of my last questions for you is what you're currently working on, and if you can share that with us.
Sure. I think the thing that I can talk about, it's not actually out yet, so I don't know if I should talk about it, but I probably can talk about it. Especially if my manager sent you the focus of it. That must mean it's okay for me to talk about it.
I'll
So
sign an NDA.
um, it's called the pollution piano. So
Okay,
the
cool.
core idea is that there's 12 locations worldwide that you can go to. When you get there, you hold your phone out and you'll see a digital piano with me playing that piano. And the music that is being played is changes based on the air pollution quality in that specific location at that specific time. So it's all happening in real time. And the air quality pollution is indicating to an AI music generator what type of music should be played. So if it's the air pollution quality is good, then the music is relaxing,
Major.
softer. Yeah, and then if it's not, then it's a little bit more frantic. It's a little bit more.
That's
Uh,
cool.
so that just to go back to the earlier point about like that idea first and the tech not being, it's more complicated than normal, but it's not super very extreme complicated. So on the back end, this is probably one of the only times I'll talk about the back end, because I imagine that for this podcast audience specifically, that's what they're interested in. But most people won't be. But um there's like a Google API for air quality for that, that is in real time, and then a music AI generator. So getting those two APIs to talk to each other was really the complicated part.
Yeah.
So that produces new music every single time. So everybody who goes gets a different, even if they're there really at the same time, because it's AI music generated, then they're going to get different music. So it's a very unique experience. And then it's using Niantic
Yeah.
in partnership with Niantic, who made Pokemon Go. This is a
Yeah.
experience. So
Mhm.
it's using their new studio platform to host the experience, to do the plane tracking, to do the map, all of that sort of stuff.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that's really cool.
the goal for that, there's going to be a launch for this virtual experience happening in sort of like the next few weeks. And then the goal would be to have, for me to paint a physical piano at a culturally relevant event or at a museum or something like that. And then people will be able to go to that location, hold their phone up to the physical piano, and then it would just be me that appears digitally to play the music. And there might be like a few different pianos all over the world. That would be the plan. So
Dude, that's
I
awesome.
think,
Yeah, that's a really cool idea.
thank you. It's not. I think it's something that everybody understands in terms of the air pollution. But what I like about it is it's essentially hitting home the fact that like the air you're breathing in now like is not good, or
While experiencing this. Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of making like this invisible information like visible and audible as well. So obviously using AR for like a sustainability promotion piece is important to me as well. So it ticked a lot of boxes for me internally, which is why I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, man. It's using your capabilities to do something that's going to benefit people, I think is such an awesome way to work, uh, your art into the technology side of things. I think that's great. That really tags into like, what we were talking about just a little bit before, which was, being able to experience emotions in ways that you really hadn't before, or your environment in ways that you couldn't before with technology. And this is great. I hope that I am close enough to one to be able to experience it once you launch it.
Are you in LA?
No, I'm in Ohio,
Oh, okay.
so no, I'm probably not close to anything. Uh,
Maybe I'll add one, a 13th location in Ohio.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah.
I would love that. That'd be great, man. I'll go there. I'll put on an event for it. That'd be pretty cool. Uh, in closing, which sucks. I hope we should jump on another one because it's been such a good convo. Um, I would love to do a subsequent podcast. But in closing, I always ask if you have either a book recommendation, a website, a new software or app or blog or something that you think um, people who are watching this who are into like the AR or artists that want to do AR should be using or seeing.
Um, that's a really good question. So the two books that came to mind immediately, one of them is more creative. So that's Rick Rubin's creative. Actually forget what the book's called, but if you look at Rick Rubin's book, that was a really interesting read for me last year, just to think about how ideas come about and how to like, I'm trying to navigate as an emerging artist, like how to stay true to yourself and that sort of stuff. So that's like more of a creative leading book. And then the second book this is more for like commercial. This is Blue Ocean Strategy. I remember the title because I only read it a few weeks ago, which is probably why it was first of mind. But that's essentially about how to position a business or a freelance, if you're a freelancer, as to not have any competition. Because if you have competition, then at some point it's just a race to who does it cheaper, or you just make things hard for yourself. But we just rebranded Dime. It was originally called Dot Studios, and we rebranded it to Dime. And it's reading that book first was very beneficial because it just made me think about how do you position yourself, how is your offering different or better or unique enough that you just don't have any competition. So I'd recommend reading that.
Yeah, those sound great. I think the book was called The Creative Act: A Way of Being by Rick Rubin.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one.
Right.
Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll link those in the description as always if you care to pick that up. And that is it for this podcast. Thanks, man. That flew by. I love
Yeah.
chatting about this stuff. So I could go all day on augmented reality. So I wish you the best in these upcoming ventures. Definitely stay in touch and
Mhm.
let us know what you're working on in the future in another podcast. I'm pretty excited to be able to book that later on. And if you have anything you'd like to say in closing.
No, I think that's it. I just want to say thank you again for having me on. I don't usually get to just be nerdy and talk about this sort of stuff, and it's nice for me to kind of go a bit deeper into those questions about like why I make art. It's not something I think about all the time. So this has been enjoyable for me. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course, man. I could. That's why I started this, so I could just be nerdy with people. I don't get paid to do it. I just do this for fun. So I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk to us about your craft.
Of course. Thanks for
All
having
right,
me.
man. Yeah, you got it. We'll see you on the next one.